Hey guys, so I've been meaning to make this video for a while, but haven't gotten around to it. Um, I think the word atheism is a problem for me. It shouldn't exist. Many atheists might agree because it is a default position that should not need its own term. No one defines themselves as an a-Santa Clausist or as an a-fairyist, so why should anyone define themselves as an atheist? Yet this is not the problem for me. I fear that since the definition is narrow, that it only applies to a belief in God after all, that its original intent may have been lost. And if it's not lost, I'm afraid that it may be lost in the future, so I thought I should make this video now, just beforehand. The position of atheism is a result of an application of evidence-based scientific arguments. It relies on the scientific principle of the null hypothesis, and it demands testable and repeatable predictions that, if you watch any of my videos on evolution, you would know are a hallmark of science. I'm talking about, of course, of the use of Bayesian inference. But I'm afraid that an atheist may define himself simply by that word atheist, and he might have forgotten the scientific principles required to derive it. He might not even have learned it. If this is the case, then he may not apply those same principles for anything outside of the subject of religion. He may not even apply those principles to the subject of religion as he should. Maybe those principles were never learned, or never understood, or never respected. Pat Condell, for example, seems to be really bitter and angry about religion. So much so that he ignored the very important fact that the Ground Zero Mosque is not at Ground Zero. It's a few blocks away. Then you get into the point of where that boundary should be, where that mosque shouldn't exist. So, is that evidence-based? Is that really reasonable? I don't think so. In reference to, for another example, in reference to American Muslims who worship in the direction of Mecca, Thunderfoot claimed that he, quote, will not be lectured on the virtue of tolerance from someone who, in order to comply with their religion, gets down on their knees 5 times a day and pray to an icon of discrimination, end quote. But here's the problem, Thunderfoot. Simply praying to an icon of intolerance does not make one intolerant. One should always, in science, consider alternative possibilities, not just the ones you are biased about. So in this case, maybe those Muslims do not understand the history of the icon. Maybe it is simply a repetitive tradition that they never paid any attention to, that they never put any thoughtful thought behind the meaning of. Or maybe they simply disagree with that particular aspect of the icon and worship their own abstract version of God. For example, my parents worship a god who has 8 wives, Krishna. But if I try to get married that many times, they will definitely kill me. So when they worship him, they are imposing their own values onto the god, rather than taking the god's life as an example for their own life. In other words, Thunderfoot, you are lacking something crucial. Direct evidence that American Muslims are on average intolerant. Your argument is presented with an attempt of using logic, which I think is very weak. This is the same thing that I see with some atheists who deny global warming. They use terrible logic to conclude that scientists are corrupt, yet they hypocritically use the same science every day in their lives, and trust science when it applies to things like evolution or medicine, when it's something direct to their own lives, or something they find to be an important concept in their lives. Yet they show no evidence of a conspiracy of for some types of scientists and not for other types of scientists. Why are climate change scientists corrupt? Why aren't evolutionary scientists corrupt? You need to look at these alternative possibilities in the science when you're making evidence-based arguments, and they don't do it. I remember one atheist who messaged me to say that I'm one of the sheep because I accept global warming, and he is not a sheep because he denies both God and global warming. Since when does being an atheist mean that you deny everything, rather than just things that don't have any evidence? You see, I get really pissed when a Christian tells me that my religion, Hinduism, is the wrong one. But when an atheist tells me the same thing, I don't mind as much. And I think this is because if Christianity eradicated Hinduism from the planet, all that would happen is one illogical belief in God would replace another illogical belief. Then I become really defensive about my culture and my history. But if atheism eradicated Hinduism, then we have rationality and reason replacing irrationality. I don't mind losing my history as much anymore when something better is replacing it. At least that's what I initially thought. But what if people like Pat Condell won? If atheism crushed all religions simply by blocking them from discourse, simply by sheer force of hate, then what's the difference between the conquest of atheism and every other conquest in history? Atheism can only be unique and can only be rational if it facilitates a decent and open conversation. As long as we refuse a debate, as long as we despise a Muslim's right to practice their irrationality, we are not changing anything. Since I know we are the rational side, since I know we have the evidence, I am not afraid that I will lose. This is my challenge to fundamentalist religion, but it's also my challenge to any conclusion that is not based on evidence, from creationism to homophobia. Furthermore, I think some atheists put too much emphasis on religion as the force we need to fight. I think the ignorance from religion is simply a small sliver of something that pervades all aspects of society, and even atheists fall for this. Do the violent verses in the Quran influence Muslims to kill? Yes, I think so. But once again, I would like to consider some alternative possibilities based on evidence. For example, those same violent verses exist in the Old Testament. Yet how many genocides have we seen Jews commit in the past 3,000 years? Not that many. Now, one explanation for this is that the Jews were a dispersed population for a long time and did not yield enough power. But either way, violent verses are clearly not enough based on this evidence to blame the religion alone for bloodshed. On the other hand, Jesus preached peace. And how many genocides have Christians committed? Plenty. Well, one explanation is that when Jesus preached, Jews were a subjugated minority in Rome. Eventually, they replaced Rome, and they committed the same acts that Rome did as Christians. This is exactly what I want atheism to avoid. I want this to be done right, so that we don't just replace one irrational belief with another. There are obviously plenty of other factors that influence violence besides religion. Resources, education, opportunities for a comfortable life. I think these broader factors are the ones that we should target, not religion. I don't even think religion is that significant. We should get rid of the word atheism and remember that we are simply rationalists in all aspects of life. If we do this, I think we will transcend ignorance.